It happened again. AI models escaping to the internet and breaking into organizations undetected. This time, it's Anthropic. The company says AI models that were training in a closed testing environment actually escaped and accessed the internet before breaking into the systems of 3 organizations. Anthropic says they only found this out after conducting a review once they heard about a similar incident at OpenAI last week. I want to bring in Fareed Zakaria, host of CNN's Fareed Zakaria GPS. Fareed, good to see you. I mean, look, we've now seen AI models from two of the most popular AI companies in the whole world breaking into other organizations. Do you see that as a kind of a break glass moment for the AI industry?
Yeah, but we should have had the break glass moment a while ago because Anthropic, which is actually the most responsible company of all the major companies doing this, has been warning of precisely this kind of thing. Now, what happened here, it's very interesting. The models were essentially doing cybersecurity drills, and they had been told they did not have access to the internet. In these 3 cases, they looked at 140,000 cases, and in 3 of them, by mistake, literal human error, they were in fact granted internet access. But the models had been told you don't have internet access. So the models thought this was a simulation. They were being sort of tricked into they were being given a charade simulation where it looked like this was the internet, but it was actually not the internet. So it's not a problem that makes you think, oh my God, we're all going to die or anything like that. What it should show is that it is very important to monitor these. It is very important that there be some standards. It is very important that we get this stuff in place now because, Laura, the main thing that's about to happen is the models are going to start writing themselves. This is something in the field they call recursive self-improvement. So you understand, right now, the models are still being written by human beings, and you can imagine putting in some of these guardrails and regulations and saying, double check if you actually have internet access or you don't. At some point, Claude 7 is going to write Claude 8, and Claude 8 is going to write Claude 9 because they're going to be so much better than any human coders that they will be writing themselves. And at that point, we don't know what kind of controls are in there. We may think we know, but these are such super smart programs with so much, millions and millions of lines of code. Nobody is going to know. So it's very important that we start thinking about it. Anthropic, I spent 2 days at Anthropic last week. They are trying their best to figure this out. They've written a constitution for their programs. Nobody else has, which is kind of like a governing document that tells it how to try to steer it in, ethical, lawful ways. But it's an awfully difficult task because these things are getting smarter and smarter, and the level of complexity is soon getting to the point it's beyond human beings.
That timeline of when it could engage in the level of self-improvement such that a human being or a human entity could not regulate or try to undermine it is what the real fear for people is. And if they can't essentially prevent it either through human error or otherwise, I wonder how regulators, like people in Congress or across the globe, could possibly endeavor to do so if those who make these programs and then watch them improve are unable to contain. Is there a level of inevitability around these companies about the prospect of one day not being able to control the beast?
Look, there's an inevitability that it's going to get very, very complicated, and humans are going to be struggling to keep up. And probably what we will do is we'll use AI to regulate and detect AI. But there is a path. Look, no government is going to sit back if there is some major, the danger here is if you do nothing, there will be some major negative event. And then government will step in, it'll regulate badly, it'll over-regulate. So it's much better to get in earlier. The one model, there's no perfect model because AI is just so much more transformative than anything. But if you look at the financial industry, the way the Fed regulates banks and other entities is it takes a lot of expertise from the banks. It gets a lot of people, some of them on loan, some of them work full time. There's a kind of rotation in and out. They talk to industry all the time, to the bankers, and they try to, it's almost like a public-private partnership. And I wonder if that is the kind of thing we need with AI, because we are not going to be able to get some bureaucrat in Washington who hasn't spent time in the bowels of Anthropic or OpenAI or Gemini knowing what's happening.
Well, a bureaucracy can't react in that level of speed you would require. Fareed Zakaria, thank you so much.
This comes just a week after OpenAI disclosed a strikingly similar incident. Its own AI model escaped a test, essentially, and hacked an AI builder platform, a company called Hugging Face. Think of this as like a virtual lab leak. That's what happened. In both cases, safety guardrails were removed because it was supposed to be a contained and safe environment to test the model's capabilities. They proved far more advanced and accidentally led the AI to break out and then exploit weaknesses to infiltrate real-world servers. So joining me now on what this all means for his first interview since the breach last week is Hugging Face CEO Clem DeLong. It's very nice to meet you. Thank you for being here. I'm curious just first,
thanks for having me,
how you learned this happened initially to you guys and what your first reaction and thought was when you did.
Yeah, you talked a little bit about a roller coaster before, right? That's kind of like what it felt like to us. First, kind of like just detecting what we think has been kind of like the first publicly disclosed autonomous AI cyber attack, and then realizing that it was from OpenAI. Fortunately, we're an AI platform, so we managed to defend ourselves, interestingly, with an open model coming from China. But it felt like very incredible development for the field and for us.
Yeah, I would say that. I was fascinated to hear about how you detected and how you managed the breach, because as you said, you used a Chinese open source model to contain it. One of your executives told CNBC that you went that route only after you tried to use Anthropic's Fable 5 model, but that didn't work because of the model's guardrails. This all matters just in general, but also matters because the Trump administration right now is reportedly considering banning access to Chinese models. With your very unique perspective on this now, should they?
No, of course not. That would be terrible, because that would remove capabilities for the defenders, right? What we realized during this attack is using a model on our own infrastructure, because all of that was private data, was mandatory, and you can only do that with open models. So having access to these open weights, wherever they come from, was incredibly useful to us. And the interesting thing is that we didn't use kind of like the direct Chinese version. We used the version from NVIDIA, which kind of like shows the beauty of open models, which is that everyone can customize, remix them, host them themselves. So even if they come from China, they are safe to use in the US.
I think what you're hitting on is something that's really important that people need to understand, which is your whole premise of Hugging Face and what you guys promote and push for is for transparency and collaboration in this new AI world. I saw you were very transparent about on X and talking about what you're now trying to discuss with OpenAI in the aftermath of this incident. You're asking OpenAI as part of it for them to commit $100 million in compute to help the Hugging Face community build powerful cyber defenses, you wrote. Has OpenAI responded to that?
We are having good conversations with them, good discussions. They've been kind of like good partners, not only during this incident, but in the past. And I truly think that they realized that there was a very unprecedented event, right? Like everyone has to remember that the cyber attack is a crime. This is illegal, and we have to find a way to make sure these things don't happen more regularly. And so I think they understood kind of like the seriousness of this event and are trying to take measures that are aligned with the seriousness of this event.
Well, and Clem, you raised something that's really important. Like, a cyber attack is a crime. This is an unprecedented and new, avenue of it. But if you don't get a $100 million commitment and OpenAI, I don't know, balks or doesn't play ball here, would you consider taking legal action?
We don't want to. I think the world and AI needs more collaboration than kind of like adversarial, kind of like actions. Obviously, we're a tiny startup with like 200 people, and we don't necessarily have kind of like the legal resources or the will to spend a lot of our time on legal avenues. But I think in general, because now we're not talking only about OpenAI, but also about Anthropic, apparently, because it happened to them too. I think we have to make sure that the legal frameworks, keep these events really illegal, keep the companies that are doing some mistakes leading to that accountable. Otherwise, we're gonna end up in a very different world. We don't want to end up in a world where doing cyber attacks on other companies is normalized.
Exactly. I mean, as one cyber expert put it, like people shouldn't think of this as, oh, this is just now something that happens. The way he described it, one cyber expert was like, this is negligence. This needs to be addressed. Clem, it is great to have you on. Thank you so much for coming in and talking about what your company has now faced and dealt with and managing quite well in this unprecedented incident. Thanks so much.